Hello, my name is Al Benzing with the B-29 B-24 Squadron, and today I'd like to introduce to you two of our B-24 centric webinars. This first will be a B-24 second in command or Copilot checkout by Kathy Royer. It runs about 20 minutes, and I think you'll find it very interesting. And next week we'll have a video from Kurt Lewis, who discusses his checkout as captain or aircraft commander. It's a bit more involved process, and I'm sure you'll enjoy that as well. In doing these two B-24 webinars, the focus obviously is on our Diamond Lil and how we would like to be able to continue to fly this aircraft. Of course, we're always looking for support for the squadron in general. Because of the COVID-19, we've not been able to do our touring this year. But this particular airplane is very special to us. She's been flying with us since 1968. And last year, I had the honor of flying her at quite a few different shows all around the country, and very popular with the public, and did many ride flights with her. If you're not already familiar with our website, it's cafb29b24.org. And you can see at the bottom of this page that we are featuring both aircraft and are offering a Books for Bombers promotion in support of these aircraft. B-24, our Diamond Lil, is in need of some landing gear parts. Found some cracks, need to be replaced. There are none, so they need to be manufactured. So we have a company that can do that, but it's a very expensive process. We need to raise about an additional $50,000. And our goal is to have that money available by the end of 2020 so we can get the parts ordered, received, installed in time to have Lil flying for her birthday in May of 2021. Which birthday? Her 80th birthday. It's a big milestone. And we really would need to have this aircraft out on tour with us on our Air Power History Tour next year. So we are highlighting Ted's Traveling Circus as an incentive. This is a definitive history of the 93rd Bomb Group, B-24 Bomb Group. Tremendous amount of information about the missions and crews, their hardships, their tragedies, their crew stories. It's a fabulous book. It's a huge book. Hardcover, about a 3-inch thick, 8.5 by 11 book. And we are also continue to offer Reign of Fire by Charles Phillips. He's an aircraft commander of the B-29. For the B-24 book, $124 or more. And for the B-29 book, $129 donation or more. And basically, we're trying to continue to operate and to continue to have B-24 on tour with us. So your support is greatly appreciated, and we hope you're able to help us. Now we're going to go into Kathy Royer's 20-minute video. You'll see how unique an experience this is. We have people that are interested in flying with us from time to time. We encourage that. We can use good people, and this will open your eyes a little bit to what the process is and how this is done in our squadron. Thank you once again.
Hello, I'm Kathy Royer, and I had the distinction of being the first officer to get checked out on the B-24 Diamond Lil, and that was last year, July 29th, 2019. And due to maintenance and the COVID-19 virus, I probably will have this distinction for a few more months. Al Benzing asked me to do this presentation to talk about the process of becoming a pilot for the squadron and also what it was like checking out in Diamond Lil. Well, first, you need to be a member. You need to be a member of the Commemorative Air Force, and then you can join any number of squadrons. I happen to already belong to the WASP squadron and to the Florida wing. So to fly the B-24, I had to join the B-29, B-24 squadron. So to get to this page to join, there's the address at the bottom of the page, cafb29b24.org. And you go up and you hit the join or renew button, and it will take you through the process. And if you're not currently a member of the Commemorative Air Force, it will also sign you up for that. So for me, I just had to hit the join button and pay my dues for this squadron, and I was a member. If you want to be a pilot, there are certain minimum qualifications that you have to meet. To be a pilot on the B-24, you need to have 500 hours total time. You also need to have a commercial license with a multi-engine and instrument rating, and also a second-class medical. There's a certain amount of experience that the squadron would like you to have to fly these airplanes. And I'll just tell you about my background and why some of this is important to the squadron. As you can see, I was an Airbus captain for an airline. I'm now retired. But the squadron does like experience from professional pilots, airline pilots, corporate pilots, military pilots. They know that we understand standardization, crew resource management. We've been through lots of ground schools and lots of check rides. And we've also been on the road a lot. If you become a pilot for the B-29, B-24 squadron, you will be expected to go on tour. And they would like a 3-week commitment from you. It doesn't have to be all at the same time, but 3 weeks is the minimum commitment. I also have general aviation experience. This is me in my little RV-8, and also tailwheel experience. General aviation experience is good because the CAF does fly day VFR. So knowing the aim, VFR radio calls, traffic patterns, airspace, etc. is helpful. Tailwheel experience is good, even though you'll be flying a nose wheel airplane if you're flying the bombers. But those bombers have some unusual taxiing characteristics, so the tailwheel time is very important. But probably what was the most helpful for me to becoming a B-24 pilot was my experience in the C-47. This also gave me some radial engine experience. I flew this particular C-47 for about 3 years as a co-pilot and accumulated about 70 hours. There are a few similarities. Basically, the engines are the same. So knowing how to start the engine, run it up, and manage the power in flight was very similar from the C-47 to the B-24. On the right, you'll see a picture of the throttle quadrant of a B-24, and it's very similar to the C-47. You have the prop on the left, throttles in the center, and the mixture on the right. It's just that on the B-24, there's 2 more of everything. If you have the experience and the flight time, your next call would be to Archie Taylor, our operations officer, and let him know you're interested. He will most likely direct you to this website, cafoperations.org. And here you will fill out this 601 flight experience form and send Archie your medical and license copies. Before you get to fly, you need to go to ground school. It's an annual event. usually held in the winter or early spring in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Lasts about 2 to 3 days and is very professionally done. You get to cover all kinds of items. Of course, there will be a systems review for the airplane. The flight manuals. There's a very extensive operations manual and the flight manual for the airplane itself, which you will be expected to be familiar with. There's even a test at the end of the course. And they go over procedures and checklists. And along with that, they do review any of the CAF hot items that may have cropped up during the past year. And there is also a CRM, Crew Resource Management course. These are things that are good to know for your check ride, all the profiles and the call outs. And this is a good chapter to read. Also, the flight characteristics, and it goes over all the maneuvers you will be doing on your check ride. So your check ride will consist of this. Right here in the middle of the page is the SIC or Copilot check ride. And those maneuvers include steep turns, stalls, emergency descent, simulated engine failure on takeoff above 400 feet, an engine in-op landing simulated, and 3 takeoffs and landings. And I now understand they're also going to include unusual attitudes and an instrument approach with a simulated engine out. So it's going to get a little longer and more involved. All right, here I am actually in the seat, and you can see we're in the air. How this all came about, I was in Oshkosh last year, and I got a call from Archie Taylor. They needed a co-pilot to fly a transition from La Crosse, Wisconsin to Lincoln, Nebraska. And Archie said if I could get over there, he knew I was in Oshkosh. He said, if you can get over there, we'll get your checkout in the B-24 done. So that was pretty hard to turn down. So I flew my RV-8 over to La Crosse a couple days before the transition. I was hoping to be able to fly in the airplane as an observer when they did some ride flights, just so I could watch the crew. But that didn't happen. All the ride flights were sold out. But I was able to spend time in the airplane on the ground, you know, finding where all the switches were, getting comfortable in the cockpit, and reviewing the profiles, callouts, and checklists. Not only that, because I was there a couple days early, they put me to work on the tour. I got to do tours through the B-29 and also sell tickets out at the gate. It was a great opportunity to meet the other volunteers and see what it was like to be on tour, and I had a marvelous time. A lot of work, but a lot of fun. So my first time flying the airplane was when I did my check ride. Al Benzing was the captain and the check pilot. Here is a picture of our airplane. I wish I had a picture of the overhead panel, but I don't. Starting the airplane is a coordinated effort between the pilot and the co-pilot. So the pilot or the captain, he has his hand overhead on the starter and the primer and one hand on the throttle, while the first officer has a hand overhead on the mag switch and the other on the mixture, ready to bring that up when the captain calls for it. So we started engine 3 first, then 4, 2, and 1. Here is my actual flight from La Crosse to Lincoln. I've got to tell you, though, a little bit about the airplane. First of all, I found out that the hardest thing about the airplane is not flying it, but taxiing. It is by far the most unusual airplane I have ever taxied. First of all, it has a free castering nose wheel. The rudders are totally ineffective at slow airspeeds. And when you press on the brakes, you're never quite sure when they're going to engage. You also taxi with the control locks in. So therefore, you are taxiing with the brakes. So it becomes a tap dance. And you want to keep the airplane straight on the taxiway. It's a little tap, tap, tap with one foot, followed immediately tap, tap, tap by the other foot. It takes some practice to get used to. My first attempt was pretty rough and jerky as we kind of heaved from one side to the other of the taxiway. I'm sure the crew members in back of the airplane were laughing their heads off. Takeoff also a little challenging on the takeoff roll. You need to have that tail wheel centered. I thought I did, but as I added power, I saw we were heading to one side of the runway. Fortunately, before things got too out of hand and Al had to take over the airplane, the rudder became effective and I was able to steer us back towards the center line. For takeoff, we used 47 inches and 2,700 RPM. Flew the aircraft off the ground between 100 and 110 knots, accelerating to 120 knots. So now you want to get the gear up, and that's a tap, tap on the brake till you hear a clunk. Then you call for gear up. And while you're doing this, you don't do any turns while the gear is coming up. And you want to make sure you keep your airspeed between 120 and 130, because 135 is the gear speed. So once the gear is up, you call for flaps and you can set climb power, which we were fairly light. So we used 35 inches and 2,300 RPM. And we got to our cruise altitude. We brought the power back to 30 inches and 2,000 RPM. And that gave us about a true airspeed of 180 knots. Al was nice enough to give me a little time to get comfortable before we did the air work. The airplane actually has a couple Garmins. It's got a 796 and a 530 and a place for your iPad. Being a Garmin pilot, I found the units pretty easy to use, so that was one less thing to worry about. So then we started our air work. We did stalls. We did a simulated engine out. We did a simulated emergency descent. And you can see where the donut is. That's where I did my steep turns. Coming into Lincoln, we used this profile. It's the visual approach profile for the B-24. I was really lucky on my checkout. The weather was gorgeous and there was not much wind. So we had slowed the airplane down to enter the pattern at 150 knots and 1,500 feet AGL. And the next little, and at that point you could get flaps 10. So the next thing was to get it slowed down to 135 knots on the downwind so you could get the gear down. And as I recall, to get the airspeed down, we had to pitch up just a little bit so the airspeed bled back to 135 knots so we could get the gear down. Once the gear was down, we could get to flaps 20 and call for the landing checklist. Then there's a little discretion on the flaps 30. You do want to be below 120 knots. So somewhere on base, typically you will call for flaps 30, and we used flaps 30 for landing. Power management can be a little tricky. You need to keep the manifold pressure 3 to 5 inches above the RPM. So it can make it a little challenging at times to slow down. Once you're on approach, you can bring back your power to 18 inches and 1800 RPM. And having a nice stable approach will make landings easy in this airplane. So we landed and I got to taxi back jerkily for another takeoff. My takeoff out of Lincoln was a little less heart thumping than my takeoff out of La Crosse was. I was now ready for that departure from the center line, and just getting a little differential power in straightened it right up. And by about that time, the rudders were effective. So that was a much nicer takeoff. We came around for another approach. And this time, as we got down towards the runway, Al had me go around. Now, we had talked about this en route, so it was not a big deal. We did the go around, came back around for another approach and landing. So on this takeoff, the next takeoff, once we got above 400 feet, Al retarded #1 throttle, gave me 0 thrust for our simulated engine out work. And it's the same as all 4 engines operating, same procedures. So we came around and we were on final this time for our engine out landing, and ATC made us go around. There was a traffic issue. So off we went. It was, I guess, nice to get another go around. By now I'm pretty hot and sweaty, but it worked out very well. We came around again with the engine simulated out. This time was able to make the 3 engine landing, and that was pretty uneventful. We taxied back to the ramp, or to the ramp. My taxiing was getting slightly better, although not nearly as smooth as I would like it to be. And quite honestly, I thought I had not done too badly, but after we shut down and I looked out the window, there's a crew kissing the ramp. So I guess they were glad to be back alive. Here I am in Lincoln. I've just completed my check ride. You can see both me and the airplane are in one piece. And I was lucky enough in September to go out for a couple days with the tour and do some real ride flights. You can see I've now graduated to a fully functioning Copilot, and I even was given my red hat. I've got to say this was one of the nicest experiences I've had. It's definitely an experience of a lifetime. And I recommend anybody out there who has the interest and the experience to come out and fly for the squadron. Not only will you meet great people, have a wonderful time, but you'll be keeping these airplanes flying. Thank you.